Hello, everybody. Hi, Murray. Hi, Joe. Can't see that name. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Doing well. It's all good.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad. It's been a rough day, but had some disturbing news earlier, but God is good.
Oh, I'm
He's
sorry.
faithful.
about that.
I know. It's life.
Times for a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm. Very trying times for a lot.
Mhm. Well, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's so gray and dreary too. But
Yeah.
I always like to say, you know what? It's what makes the flowers grow, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me turn my video on. Yeah, now I can see.
There she is.
Yeah, I forgot I didn't have the video on.
It's like to be able to see everybody.
I know. It does make a difference. Let me
It
turn this
does.
front light on.
Guess we'll give it a minute to let some more people join us. But I want to start fairly promptly because I think we've got about an hour here.
Okay. Sounds good. That's about all I have, if that. Just want to turn my video on.
Say, may I ask who organized this?
I actually contacted Christine King,
Uh-huh.
who was a presenter at the Michigan leadership, the Michigan Democratic Party leadership training. And I heard tons and tons and tons and tons of people raving about her. And so I just contacted her right away, got her number and contacted her and asked her if she could do like our maiden voyage for the DEI committee. So she's going to present to us today, and I guess I'll just kind of start. That's how I came across Christine King. She's a labor advocate and a UniServ director for the Michigan Education Association, and she's been involved with the diversity, equity, and inclusion training since internally with the MEA and externally for about the last 2 years. So, like I said, she said yes right away. I'm super excited to have her here. I'm hoping that this will be the first of many different trainings that the DEI committee offers, and maybe other committees as well. So with that being said, I will introduce to you Christine King. I've lost her on my screen. Where'd she go?
I'm here. I know, this is a big group of people.
I know. I'm like, where? Oh, there she is.
This is a big group. Well, thank you. Thanks, Jody. Thanks for asking me to join you. So like Jody said, basically, I work for MEA, and MEA is very committed to DE&I, diversity, really committed to working towards inclusion. And so part of that, it was developing a committee and doing trainings and kind of educating ourselves and having conversations. So basically I was working on presentations for work, and my daughter Hannah King works for the Michigan Democratic Party. So when Lavora asked that, we need to do some of this kind of thing for the Democrats, Hannah was like, well, my mom does this stuff all the time. And so basically that was how it all happened, and then I sort of thought about what it means to be a Democrat and what that means at this particular time in our history, with all the things that are going on, and how we maybe have to recommit ourselves to some of our core beliefs. But that being said, it's called a training, but really it's just like a discussion with a little bit of information and then some discussion. I don't know everything about race or equity or inclusion. I don't know their experiences. I'm just going to help facilitate your first discussion on this topic. And please, if you want to comment, you can say something, you can whatever, however you want to do it. And I'm not an expert. This is not actually, I'm going to suggest that maybe all of us are just on a path, and we can go on that path together, or we can resist the path or whatever. And I'm just on this path too. So I've learned a lot in the last year and a half, and every day I learn something new, and about the complexities. But I'm feeling that my view of how things are is changing as I learn more. So it's not a stagnant. None of us will have arrived, maybe ever, but we can try, right? Okay, and then the other thing is I'm not a technology wizard, just so you know. So I am 58 years old, so not that I want to do any ageism or anything, but I'm not used to, everything on a screen and Zoom. It's cool, but it's not my first way of doing things. So I think you can see my presentation, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. And then I can't see the chat. So if you have, so maybe Jody, if somebody wants to say something or whatever, just let me know. You could just interrupt me. How does that sound?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, so this little presentation basically is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have to start with a disclaimer, which I almost started with before I even started, the idea that we're not experts. No one has arrived. It's a complicated issue. It's about how humans relate to each other. But one thing I want to set a disclaimer is right now is that I am going to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, largely in the framework of and see this, even this part I still trip over, the Black or African American or the darkest people. I mean, I don't know, like what, I don't always know exactly what to say, but I'm going to say the Black experience is going to be a focus of my discussion tonight. But it's like when you set a place at the table, it doesn't really matter who the guest is if you've set the place. So sometimes when I've done this presentation now a few times afterwards, people will say, well, what about this group? Or what about that group? Or I've had this experience with my group that maybe is also underrepresented and marginalized. And I am just going to say, like, this is more general, even though I have some specific elements of the Black experience I'm going to talk about, but all we're trying to do is figure out how we can set a place at the table for everyone. So I know there are many other groups that are disenfranchised or are not treated fairly or don't feel like they belong. And that's very real. But it's just not the focus of this evening. But hopefully this will be the beginning of lots of discussions. So we call it DE&I. Why does it matter? Does it matter? They're not all the same. Diversity just means a wide variety of people, and because they are a wide variety, they may be treated differently simply because of their differences. Equity is an approach that we work towards to ensure that everyone gets an equal opportunity. So sometimes what's equal for one group because of the diversity factor may not be what the other group needs in order to have equity. So I mean, I bet some of you have seen there's a little cartoon with some kids looking over a fence or whatever, and someone needs a step stool or whatever, because we're not all in the same place. The playing field, we didn't start at the same spot at all. And inclusion is embracing, leveraging, celebrating strengths, our diversity, ensuring that everyone feels welcome and included, and not just tolerating them or going through the motions, like we're just going to overcome differences, but actually trying to sort of focus on our common humanity. To me, inclusion is like the gold standard. That's where we want to be, but it's going to take work. It's going to take work on all our parts to get there, because every day when I learn more about this, I think, like, how do you not judge someone at all? Like, that's a great goal, but we all do it all day long. We judge ourselves, we judge other people. I mean, so that's what I mean. That's sort of our nature, to make judgments. And so it's important that we just try to do our best, right? And we try to move forward in building that sort of environment of inclusion where we don't feel threatened by differences, but we actually embrace them. As Democrats, you guys, I should say you guys, I am a Democrat. I live in Sheboygan, Michigan. I'm part of the Sheboygan County Democratic Party, a very small, like, if we have 68 people at our meeting, we've never had that. So just for the record, we've never had that many people at our meeting, but if we did, that would be amazing. But some of the tenets of the modern Democratic Party are social equity, equal opportunity. Democrats support voting rights, minority rights, LGBTQ rights. The party championed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed segregation. So the Democratic Party was the party that appropriated racial liberalism and assumed federal responsibility for ending racial discrimination. Now that is very lofty. So the Democratic Party took it upon themselves to say, we are going to end racial discrimination. That's such an honorable goal and such a huge undertaking. And to compare that sort of heartfelt, maybe even naive objective, like, can we even do that? I mean, you can work towards it, and compare that with what's happening in Georgia right now with limiting voting rights. And, that's not our party. Our party doesn't do that. So that's something to be very proud of. And so how have we done? Well, Shirley Chisholm ran. She was the first Black woman elected to the US Congress in 1968. She represented New York's 12th congressional district for 7 terms. In 72, she ran for president, which was, when you think about it, 72, that was like quite a while ago. And then, of course, we know who the man in the middle is there. And that was an exciting time and a very exciting day, the first when it happened, when we elected Barack Obama. And then, of course, now we have Kamala, who really, in some ways, is such a mix of many cultures and, has a very rich heritage. And so this has all been done by the Democratic Party. And I don't think it's done just like because it gets votes or it looks good or whatever, or we can get this person elected, because these are not the easiest people to get elected. Not at all. We see that. We see that. So I think we've done well. Do we have ways to go? Absolutely. We always do. But to recommit ourselves to this idea of really, like, we want racial justice. We want equality. So in that regard, we all have work to do, right? By definition of who we are, we're headed in the right direction, but it's hard to believe that we'll ever, I mean, that's like heaven, right? That's like utopia. I was having a meeting with a gentleman who's a teacher. He's a professor at CMU, and we were talking about this issue, and I said, how do you just like, just love everybody and get along and be fair and be equal? I said, that's like utopia. Like, are we ever going to get there as a country or society? And he said, I'm going to have to give him credit. I want to get credit for this, but he said the utopia in the human experience is actually having the conversation. And I think that's so powerful. Like, that's as close as we're going to get, is having the conversation and moving forward. Like that is where we need to be, is always having that conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about bias and why this all happens. So when people lived in very isolated groups, they all thought they were like the only one. And if you read histories of Aboriginal people, they'll call it, they might be the first people. The Japanese, had their little island, and they felt like that was the center of the universe. India, I have Indian heritage. We believe India's where it's at. So everyone lived in these isolated, geographically isolated areas, and they thought they were the people. So when they interacted with other people, establishing friend or foe was like the first line of defense. That's you've got to figure out, is this a friend or is this a foe? And we developed conscious bias, not unconscious, against those people that looked different as a protective measure. That's not my tribe. I have to protect my limited resources, so I am going to stick with my tribe. Those very conscious biases became unconscious after the world became a smaller place with many different types of people living in close proximity. Our minds, we think about how
Christine, you got muted.
Oh, I don't know how.
Sorry, I don't know either. Okay, we're good.
Okay, I don't think I did that, did I? So anyway, those very conscious biases became unconscious. And that's not like something we need to feel guilty about, but we need to grow and be aware of that, being unconsciously, we're still protecting ourselves like we're the first people, the only people, but we're not. And the world has grown so rapidly, and we've grown so much closer to each other that we have not evolved as quickly as our world has evolved. And so we have to make a conscious effort to understand our unconscious bias. Like, we have to grow ahead of our evolution. We all have unconscious biases, but that's, so I'm giving everybody a pass, including myself. Like, we all have these unconscious thoughts where it's kind of built in. We have to make a conscious effort. And here's why it's so important. And I will use the words implicit bias and unconscious bias interchangeably, because they really mean the same thing. These hidden notions can lead to discrimination. Discrimination can lead to racism. And then racism leads to institutional racism. So right now we're like very sensitive, right? Because if you do something unconsciously or foolishly, you just make a mistake, no one wants to be called a racist. So this is a hot topic, right? Who, oh, don't call me a racist. Don't say I'm a racist. I love, everybody, whatever. I've got, my best friend is a Black person. We've heard it all. Maybe those folks that are making some unconscious statement or action, maybe they're not necessarily racist. Racism develop. So I have a little bit of analogy here. So implicit bias, this is unconscious or implicit bias. I want to buy a house in a neighborhood of people that looks like me because it's comfortable and I feel like the norm. So anytime we travel, like we travel somewhere and we're not like everybody else, we always feel a little out of step. I mean, it's cool when you're traveling and you make a conscious decision, but when it's your home, you want to feel like you belong, right? So you might choose a neighborhood where people look like you. Okay, fair enough. Discrimination is then the next step. I don't go to that part of town or the Black side of town because I don't know those people. So then it becomes those people, them, how they behave, right? That's discriminating. And then racism, I don't get those people. Why are they even in my neighborhood? Like, I don't understand them. I don't want to understand them. You know, I don't want them in my neighborhood. Now that's racism for sure. And how does it, so all of that, that's simple, I just want to be comfortable around people that look like me, to institutional racism, which is I'm going to move to a better neighborhood with better schools and none of them. And we all, I think most of you maybe are familiar with redlining, where communities were basically segregated and minority people were not allowed to buy homes in certain areas. So, you know, that simple implicit or unconscious bias can grow culturally and societally into something that's much bigger and much more damning, and then holds people back generation after generation after generation. So institutional racism, you buy your first house, you know, in 1920, it's a little I don't even know how much a house would cost in 1920. I'm sure somebody here does, but it's cost $1,500, whatever. You pay it off. You leave it to your children. They sell it. They buy a better house. They have a little extra money. You know, so this allows, this property ownership allows for wealth to go from one generation to another. With institutional racism, that process was not allowed for Black Americans. So, you know, so we want to understand how serious our implicit or unconscious bias can be. But as Democrats, you know, we think we have a lot of awareness, we have a lot of understanding. Like I said, even many people, including myself, will say, I know that experience because I've had this experience, right? That's my best friend's a Black person. Or I know how something feels because I felt something like that. But we all have to think about, not think about ourselves, I guess, and think about how other people might feel, how they might be in a situation. So even in the best of us, unconscious bias can manifest as microaggressions, which is like a whole different topic, or exclusionary practices, maybe, you know, just not treating someone of color the same way that you would treat a white person. And the only way to really do that is to think like, would I say that to this person? Or would I have said that to that person? The way I just spoke to this person of color. But that's some awareness for you to have for yourself. And I'm sure many of you are saying like, no, I really do a good job with that, which is great. So if that's true, there are things you can do to actually go to the next level. As Democrats, you're probably almost ready for the next level, which is to really work towards anti-racism. So I'm going to talk a lot about like 10 things you can do today. So one thing is consciously commit yourself to egalitarianism, like make a point to make the playing field even. You know, just anytime you can raise someone up, whether it's at the gas station, letting somebody go ahead of you in line. You know, I actually, someone told me the other day, one of my colleagues, a Black man, said, unless I'm in a Black neighborhood with other Black folks, no one would ever, like, he was talking about, he was at a gas station, he was getting one thing, and the person ahead of them were getting lots of things, and, you know, the kids were kind of running around the aisle to pick up their favorite Cheetos or whatever, and he was standing there with his one thing. And however long he was waiting, that person in front of him never thought to say, go ahead. Like, why don't you just go ahead? He said in all his years, and he's like maybe my age, he said never in a predominantly white area has anyone ever said, hey, just go ahead. And that kind of, these are the things that kind of blow my mind. Like, I don't realize what that experience might be like. And then, so you can definitely commit yourself to that kind of egalitarianism, just build your awareness. And then also recognize that your unconscious bias is no more the real you than your conscious values. We are all unconscious and conscious. I don't even know, I honestly don't even know what the R word is in there for. Maybe somebody, I must have been talking about something, but you are not, you can make a decision, right? You don't have to say, well, my dad was like this, my uncle, I grew up in this neighborhood. That's all, those are all choices. You can choose to look at the world differently. Number 3, acknowledge differences rather than pretend that you're ignoring them. So that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one to navigate, because we all want to be treated equally and we all want to be treated fairly, but we don't want to be invisible either. We want our stories and our life history, no matter what color we are, to matter. So if you totally ignore that aspect of someone, you're actually not giving them that place at the table. Of course, seek out friendships with people from different groups in order to increase your brain's familiarity with different people and expand your point of view. This is also a conscious effort. Like at MEA, we have there's 80 of us, 80 UniServ directors. When we have a meeting, everyone sort of sits with their own little cadre. They sit with their own group of people. They don't really mix it up. Only after, and this is MEA, a very progressive organization, but you walk in and you sit with someone and then that allows you to network with those people that and then you only get so far ahead as those people, that group that you associate yourself with in our organization. So only after we've done this work have we said, no saving seats, no particular tables, mix it up. And when we have, unfortunately, just as we were getting started, now we're all at our own table all by ourselves at home. So, but again, a very conscious decision about something very simple. It's very natural to focus on how people are different from you, but try to consciously identify what qualities and goals you have in common. So, really think about what really matters to you, because chances are it's also what really matters to someone else. So, just have to just identify, what do I care about? As Democrats, for sure, you have so much in common about what you value and what's important and how you want the country to look. And so you really can bring that to the table and work together to make the country look like that. And then when you encounter examples of ambiguous bias, speak out. That is the hardest part, because sometimes we just think, is it worth it? You're never going to change anybody's mind. You're never going to, they're not going to feel differently. Well, we know that's not true, because if we can feel differently about something, excuse me, when we learn about it, so can other people. So there's ways to maybe gently, speak to that ambiguous behavior. This helps create and reinforce a standard for yourself and the people around you. And it also means a lot to the people that you actually say, hey, that's not cool. And when other people hear you say that, that strengthens them. So all of these things that I've said so far really can apply to any group, right? I mean, any group of people that you are, wanting to be inclusive of and to expand your cultural richness. The next slide is actually some things you can do, some statistics. So statistics are always kind of powerful. And this is, so you can share statistics about any group, women, the LGBTQ community, Asian Americans. You could always find statistics that support the fact that they really have not had the opportunity to get ahead as the dominant group. So when you encounter people that share different views in relationship to Black Americans, I like to call this like 1, 2, 3. 1, Black people in this country hold 1/10 of the wealth of white people. So for every dollar you have in your pocket, on average, a Black person has a dime. So that's pretty powerful. 1. White people with white sounding names are twice as likely to be called in for interviews, even if they have the same credentials as their Black counterparts. So, twice as likely just because your name is Jane Smith rather than something else, something that sounds, and I'm sure this applies to other groups too, Indian names, Asian names, whatever. So African American women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. And this is 2021. It's like that, the fact that women are even dying in childbirth is absolutely horrible. So, but the healthcare obviously for African Americans is extremely different than it is for the dominant group. Oh yeah, I'm actually, on the side, I actually have been looking through, I haven't started it yet, but a book that I heard a woman speaking, it's called Stronger, the Sum of Us or something like that, like SUM of Us. And it's about how much money we have lost in America by not tapping into the human resource of our minority groups. So like basically, I was thinking about an example of that. So if you have a white sounding name and a high school diploma, and this is a true statistic, you are more likely to be hired than someone with a Black sounding name who has a bachelor's degree. So when you think about running a business or hiring somebody, you are not necessarily getting the best candidate simply because of a person's name. And then on top of that, that's not good for our whole economy. I mean, like how we function, the whole resource is we are neglecting to tap into a whole resource of people. Ask what you can do, not what you need. So sometimes I think if we're, wanting to help, we'll say, I need you to tell me. I need you to tell me what I can do to help. You need to teach me. But I think sometimes that gets exhausting to always be educating the dominant group in how to behave for those groups that are not dominant. So it's maybe better to ask, like, what can I do? What can I do that will make this a more inclusive setting, a more inclusive environment? And then always acknowledge, it's good to acknowledge what you don't know. Even even I get frustrated by my best friend is Black, my cousin's married to a Black guy, my neighbor adopted. So I know everything about the Black experience now because of this one interaction, one opportunity. And I think it's okay to not know. Just say, I don't know. I don't know how that feels. And we had a little training at MEA, actually. I work on a committee with 2 Black women, and they're just awesome women. But we started talking about hair, and I was like, is this really a thing? And they shared with me some of their struggles as Black women in the professional work setting because of their hair. And we actually had a whole training about hair, and it was actually super touching, and it was quite powerful how people could be even judged just based on their hair. So, I mean, there's so much for us to learn. There's so much for us to know that, like, there's no end. So it's simple to just say, like, I don't know. Explain to me, acknowledge what you don't know. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like I said earlier, the conversation in itself is really the utopia. Like, we just have to be willing to be open-hearted and talk to each other, speak to each other, share each other's experiences, and listen and listen. And this is kind of what it all comes down to, sort of what I started at the beginning. It's all about judging and having preconceived notions about people. But like many of us learned the golden rule as a child, right? Many of us did. And actually the golden rule is really, there's some component of that in almost every major world religion. So treat others as you would like to be treated. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Seems like a good catch-all. It seems like that's great. That should solve everything. But how you want to be treated might not be how other people want to be treated. Like you might want to have an American flag in your yard and somebody else might want to have a gay pride flag in their yard. So take that idea one step further and treat others as they would like to be treated. As they would like to be treated. And in order to do that, you have to take the time to know and understand people. You just have to pause. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to know everything now. We don't have to always say the right thing, but we can always pause and say, hey, I don't know. Explain it to me. Help me to understand. Help me to know what to do. What can I do to help us work towards inclusion? And remember, we're all human beings above all else. And then these are just some resources. So that's basically it. Like, it's just like a start, a very small start of, I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see some people. That's a very small beginning of I think what's an important conversation. And feeling guilty, feeling inadequate, feeling like you know or understand the whole thing isn't helpful. Just be open-hearted and go forward. Like I said, I'm just here not as, you know, these are just some things we put together to help us raise our own awareness. I'm in no way like an expert or anything. We're just starting a journey and we're going on it. So that's about it. You know, considering that, you know, Jody was saying, yeah, I heard all these great things. I'm like, oh boy, I hope I can live up to those expectations, but it's just a beginning conversation. So is there anyone that would like to make some comments or share some thoughts?
Comments, anybody? I know that there are 88 of us here. Okay, Molly Eklund Eastley raised her hand.
Oh, Molly, I think you're muted.
Okay, I have a question about acknowledging what you don't know. Because oftentimes I think we've seen lately when people ask, well, what's wrong with yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, because the person asks what's wrong with that, they're labeled as racist or whatever because you asked that question. And it may be just you don't have the experience to know. I mean, an example. Okay, what's wrong with calling a person an Oriental? That is something that we've grown up with. That's what we've heard. But now that's racist to say that.
Well, I think Molly, finished. I don't want to.
So acknowledging what you don't know can sometimes backfire, and people don't want to allow you to learn what you don't know and ask those kinds of questions.
I don't mean saying, hey, I used to say Oriental, why can't I say that anymore, is necessarily acknowledging what you don't know. What you don't, the part you don't know is why, you know, like how that makes you, like, teach me. Like saying, hey, I used to say that when I was a kid, so I can't say it anymore. I don't get that. Like, I'm not a racist. It's very different than just saying, you know, explain to me what that means to you. Like, you know, I mean, what does that mean to you? And then, you know, I think it's just really how you frame the question or the conversation. Keep it gentle, keep it kind, and just say, you know, explain. It doesn't mean you're a racist, certainly, but we all, you know, it's hard to keep up with. And some people, you know, it's really that individual. There might be some people that don't feel that that's offensive. There may be, I know, I mean, I grew up with that word as well, but, you know, so I think it's just not so much saying this is how I always did it and I don't get why it's bad now, but just more like, how does it make you feel and what can I do to make you feel more comfortable? It's just a suggestion, Molly. There's no way it's not complicated. I mean, you know, but maybe just framing that question a little differently might help.
Thank you. Murray?
And
You're muted, Murray.
Oh yeah, Murray, you're muted. Still muted. You're that one guy today. You're still muted.
You know, I will say, Molly, while we're waiting.
Okay, I got it.
Oh, okay, sorry. That was a great suggestion, though. Erica put it, she said it depends on who you're asking and your relationship with that person. So I think, you know, every situation is a little different. So that's, I think, great advice from Erica.
Okay, for future reference, the host is not allowing us to unmute ourselves. So we have to make sure that the host unmutes us. I just wanted to comment that I've just finished reading this book. It's called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, The Origins of Our Discontents. Isabel Wilkerson is a brilliant writer and author. And I only mention it again now because many people on this screen are not able to use the chat or see it. This book does an incredible job of going through American history, the history of India and Nazi Germany, and showing how caste is created. And if there's a huge piece about the United States. And to me, it is essential reading for anybody, high school or older, who is capable of understanding. It is an incredible read. It will assist anybody who is watching this or anybody who reads it to really understand the origins of our racial discontent and how to think about it in going forward. So I wish it on everybody. It's a New York Times bestseller.
Thank you, Murray. Joe?
Okay. And I get that, you know, this is nice to do. The problem is as African-American, I don't have to read a book to learn about the discontent. I've lived this for over 60 years. And my concerns are that the reason that we're here is because people think that they don't have implicit biases or unconscious biases. And if you don't think you have that, then if you don't think you have that, then you're not going to own up to it. The other thing is that while we may have had Christine King and come in and Miss Christine King come in and talk to us, the question is, what are we going to do from now on? Because the problems that we have, say, in Oakland County or in the Michigan Democratic Party or the Democrats, period, is not going to go away because we had one person come in or we read a book. But as Black people, we want to sit down and have the conversation of why we're treated like we're treated. And the lady that first came on asked the question about Orientals. The problem I see with white America is that you want to give us a name or change the name. For example, I've always had Joseph Person or Joseph on these calls, yet everybody wants to call me Joe. But when I get ready to call somebody by their name or shorten it or mispronounce it, they want to make sure that you correct it, but you won't take the time to say Joseph. And these are the types of problems. So I just want us to really start having a real conversation because, like I say, Madam Chair, I was the first one at that was the Michigan Democratic Party Leadership Summit that we had. I was the first one to put in the chat room, we need to bring Ms. King to Oakland County to start a conversation. But I would like us to really sit down with the Black people in particularly, and the other people too. But right now, while we're dealing with the Asian American hate situation, Black people, we had one of us just get killed the other night, and they said, well, they were going for the taser, and they end up pulling their gun. So I just want us to have a real honest conversation, and everybody check their egos at the door and not listen to what I'm saying, because most of y'all, when y'all listen to me, you actually think that I'm an angry Black man. Well, I got a lot to be angry about. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed in some of the people that I'm working with. I thought they were better than this. So like I said, this is a start, Madam Chair, but I hope this is just not the end.
Thank you, Joseph. I totally agree with you. And I'm hoping that we have many, many, many more of these trainings. And I'm hoping the DEI committee is going to be on that. I think the next persons that had their hands raised were Chris and Rod. I'm trying to keep track. And I think I just asked you to unmute, but
Yep.
I'm not sure. Okay. Oh crap, sorry. I think I keep hitting ask to unmute. Alex, I'm just gonna leave this to you now.
Okay, am I back?
You are.
All right, I'll start again. Actually, so I'm glad to follow Joseph because he put a comment out in the chat and other people had too. And it's like, well, we need to have that verbal conversation and work on things. And one of the things I really disagree with, the post is your conscious bias is your real self. And he says, especially if you don't think, and that's true. But I think, we're influenced by our unconscious bias. And that's one thing I always have to keep in mind, in the present, that am I making a judgment or a call based on something that is a bias that I'm not even thinking about? So I'm trying to work on my conscious self and recognize that, there's things that influence my views of the world that are biased and unfair and unequal. And that's just something, it's not to say, okay, I get a pass, but it's something we all have to work on. And that's really all I wanted to add to that was the real self is a combination of a whole lot of things. And to me, that's a thing to work on. And it's daily chore.
Thank you. Vicky Volk Gaffigan. Hi.
Hi, I joined here because it looked like an interesting conversation, and I'm taking a class called Beloved Conversations right now. And so I think going back to the question about why we can't say something or other about a certain group of people, I think it's important to listen to how people refer to them as themselves, how they refer to themselves, and to honor that. And also, instead of asking, why can't I say this? What's wrong with that? I grew up saying that. It's better to say, to listen and see how people are referring to themselves. And if you still needed to say, how should I refer to you as, versus why can't I say that? What's wrong with that? It's how would I refer to you? How would you like me to refer to you? I think is a better question, just to be able to honor what people would like to be referred to as.
Thanks, Vicky. Cynthia, hi. Cynthia Thornton.
Hey, Jody, how you doing? Hello, everyone.
Good, how are you?
I transitioned from phone to laptop, so excuse any of the kind of craziness you may have seen going on. I want to comment, and I apologize to the sister because in my transition, I missed the name. But I do a lot of cultural competency training, primarily about LGBT. However, I am a Black woman and I happen to be gay. So I frequently refer to myself as a triple threat. Why? Because the normative and the power in this country is a white male. And when we forget that, then we're already lost in the conversation. So to the sister that was talking about Orientals, and and this applies across the board. I don't care if you're talking about race, if you're talking about national origin, if you're talking about sexual orientation, gender identity. Listening, as Vicky said, is key. If somebody tells you that they don't want to be called the N-word, or that they don't want to be called Oriental, why is it relevant if you honor them as a human being? But if you are acting from your privilege and you think that you should be able to do and say whatever you want to do and say, therein lies the problem. So if in fact we believe that we are all human beings and we believe that we are all equal, then we need to act accordingly, regardless of what we've been doing for the previous 50 years. As to the specific issue of Oriental, and I am not Asian. However, to my understanding, because I happen to have a Korean stepmother who speaks Korean, and I do not. So therein is a whole different problem. But my understanding is that while we use white and black freely, and while some black people are perfectly fine with being called black, but some white people freak out if they call somebody black, they somehow think they've insulted you. Yeah, therein lies an issue, because you're coming with, unfortunately, our history that we don't freely talk about. And Oriental, to my understanding, is much the same. There is no Oriental race. We have the Asian race, which consists of a lot of different people. Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and a whole bunch that I don't even know. But when we objectify people and we don't even take the time to understand that we're not all the same, therein lies the problem, to my understanding of Oriental. In terms of the sister saying that sometimes people don't want to let you learn, I argue that. I'm almost 60. When I talk to my younger peers, their thing is, you grown, figure it out. You got the internet, look it up. Why are you asking me, and why are you putting that weight on me? Everyone does not feel that way. But we have to understand that everybody doesn't feel like they want to be your educator. Or maybe they just don't feel that way today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe they're tired today and they just don't have the energy to explain to you what they think that you should already know. But listening to what, and as someone who's LGBT, and understanding that my trans brothers and sisters really catch the blues, that part about listening to what people are saying to you, when you see a 6'4" somebody that you swear is male, and they tell you that their name is Charlene, then their name is Charlene. Whatever your eyes are telling you, that is Charlene, and that's what you should call her. You shouldn't be asking Charlene, how can you possibly be Charlene? You should simply say, nice to meet you, Charlene.
Right. Nice.
And then rather than dominate this conversation, I'm gonna leave it there. But if anybody has any questions, holler.
Thank you, Cynthia. John and Lisa, hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
This is Lisa. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you so much for doing this. This is a conversation that is needed in every single community. So we are so appreciative that you are holding this. Christine, when I think of utopia, I think of people like you existing in that utopia. The way that you have been presenting and addressing has just been so beautifully done. You do it without any defensiveness. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for how you're handling this. But I did want to share with the group, a couple years ago, I took some phenomenal training from the ACLU of Michigan. And the purpose of that training was how to meet with state legislators to move different social justice issues, if you will, into a place of passing laws that would provide a protection for marginalized communities. And one of the things that they shared with us that really has kind of sat with me ever since is, if you think about a horizontal line that's divided into 4 quadrants. The furthest right quadrant is a sect of society that whatever issue that you are working on, no matter how much you educate them, no matter how much information, statistics you provide them, you will never, ever be able to move that sect of society. Their beliefs are so entrenched and so inherently believed that we personally will take a very strong emotional hit every time we try and engage with them, because it's going to become combative and defensive, if you will. So the place that they suggested that they want us to work in is the 3rd quadrant from the right. That's the people that think they may know, but are willing to possibly listen. And the goal with each quadrant is to move people from quadrant 3 into quadrant 2 and from quadrant 2 into quadrant 1, with the ultimate goal of moving people into a place of activism so that laws can be passed to protect people, because at the end of the day, that's what truly makes marginalized populations' lives better. So if you're looking, at minority populations racially, or if you're looking at the LGBT population, and let's just talk about real quickly the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act here in Michigan. We've been trying for decades, since that Civil Rights Act has been put in place, to get it amended to include protection for gender identity and sexual orientation. And there has been, a significant pushback, but we know that having laws in place are what protect people when they are discriminated against. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, because that, like I said, has really stuck with me as something to keep in the forefront of my mind as I am engaging with people and trying to determine, is this someone that I feel that I can move over a quadrant, or is this someone that I should, say, okay, thank you, I understand what we have differences of opinion, and move on.
I just want to say, Lisa, I think the fact that you say we have differences of opinion, that in itself, some people don't say anything. If you can just acknowledge, like, hey, that's not where that's not where I'm coming from. I think that in itself could, even with those people, it like lets you know that there's standards that you will not bend on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Daryl?
Okay, thank you very much. The discussion has been stimulating. I have flashbacks as we all discuss the discussion. And until, I'll say, people that have a predominant European history are willing to make changes in the way they think, I think this conflict is going to continue. I remember when I was in high school taking modern history, it was primarily a focus on European history. And one of the things that Britain bragged about is that the sun never sets on the British flag, which means that basically they took over many countries around the world, imposing their will on those countries. And when you combine this with what I'll call the whitewashing of American history, not acknowledging or giving credit to other ethnic groups about the good things that were contributed to this country, you're going to have this conflict. Even grammar school, we were taught to learn in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, like he discovered America. But there were people already here. So how can you discover something when people are already here? In addition, the United States government has not maintained or honored any treaty they've had with Native Americans. So when you see these types of things going on, and even South Africa, 90% of the population is Black, but you have 10% governing that country. So until the majority population is willing to concede truth, tell things the way they are, the way they actually are. I mean, I grew up in Chicago. I was born in a Providence hospital. The first successful open heart surgery was performed by Dr. Hales Williams at the hospital I was born at. And there's so many other facts that are left out of the history. And until you educate people properly about the truth and not whitewash the truth, you're going to have this conflict continue. There has to be a willingness to have fair and equitable treatment, which we currently do not have. And I don't expect everyone to understand the pain, the bitterness that my race has gone through in this country, having made a tremendous contribution to the success of this country. Anytime you have a business, one of your largest expenses is labor. And when you can get free labor, that puts you ahead of everyone else. And until we correct these situations, there's going to continue to be conflict. In fact, even this week, there was another Black man shot in Minnesota, unarmed. And I can't understand why the police can arrest a white male who has just committed mass murder, why they can arrest him alive, but they can't take in someone Black who's unarmed. So until we address these issues, I don't know how it's going to happen. And I'm wondering how this trial is going to come out, because repeatedly, it hasn't gone in a fair and equitable way. There's so many places to start, but I would start with like just telling the truth in American history and educate everyone on the true facts. I mean, I can go on, but I see we're running out of time. So I'll just stop right there and hope that we can continue to have these discussions as we go forward.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you. Miriam?
Hi. I'm coming from a place where I'm Caucasian, but my dad was Caucasian, we're Jewish. He had many Afrocentric features, physical features. And I don't know a lot of his story, but I do know, that there were incidents where he was, because of the color of his skin and where he was in the world, he suffered from discrimination and things like that. Caucasians have to be careful, and African Americans or Black people need to be careful too. As a Caucasian, I worry about the term shame being used for Caucasians. There's sort of a linear way of thinking about it that, I think that it's important for Caucasian people to be humbled, to realize that many of them come from a place where they were at one time oppressed or mistreated. We've all been there, and no one's suffering is more or less. It's all different and it's all awful. And we just need to be respectful and appreciate and try to learn about the other cultures and the other people that we're sharing this planet with. So, I think that it's important for everyone to take a step back and really listen to each other. And I don't want to take up a whole lot of time because it's far more important that I be listening to what others are saying. And I feel devastated witnessing, especially the most recent incidents. But this is awful. This is not what this country's about. This is certainly not the country that my grandparents immigrated from Europe to come to. So, and thank you for having this opportunity.
Thank you, Miriam. Brian J.
I just want to take a quick moment, and my comments really aren't so much focused on race. Obviously, I'm white, but I think we need to understand, and when I was in college, I did some studying on sociology, especially when I was in law school. And we also have to remember, especially within the Democratic Party, that there's a lot of perceived or even imagined socioeconomic discrimination, even within different races, that we would normally not notice it or perceive it, where it's almost accepted within society. And I think the GOP and the Republican Party with Donald Trump has almost capitalized on this, and they have sort of brainwashed individuals in thinking that this situation and the attainment of success beyond practical measures is doing this. And so I just think we all need to remember, I grew up around, I think I was around 12 in Hoover, around Warren, and I live in Rochester now, where people drive Bentleys to the grocery store. And I had someone tell me that we don't put our trash out early in Rochester. Simple statements. No one knows my financial background. No one knew anything about me. But we need also to remember that, perceived socioeconomic discrimination can also be very disheartening. And I mean, I'm not going to go to discuss race. I can't even understand what a Black man or woman goes through, but I just think sometimes the Democratic Party and a lot of individuals need to remember that there can also be discrimination so many different ways, that we sort of just need to remember that and not judge people solely based, on appearances or anything else. It was just a quick statement.
Thank you. Tanya.
Okay. I think when we're looking at history, we have to acknowledge the role that racism plays in capitalism. And one of the problems that I see with people who are extremely racist, many of them are also of situations where they feel they should be doing better if it weren't for those Black people getting, whatever benefits they think they're getting because they're Black. But it's a way to keep us separate rather than working together to make our lives together better, because we're all being oppressed by people who choose not to pay a living wage when they can get away with it, not to allow labor to organize and all of those other things. Racism is what has been used over centuries to keep us apart, and that's why a lot of people just, and myself included, assume that certain things are true of Black people. I just have to give an example. I was reading The New Jim Crow. I forget, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. And she was talking about, walking down the street, a white woman walking down the street and seeing a Black man coming towards her and all of a sudden clutching her purse and walking to the other side of the street. And I thought about the many times that I had done that. And yet my husband is Black. All of my in-laws are Black. I sometimes have seen young Black teenagers, with their the hair that's different and the clothes that are baggy, and I am afraid. And yet I look at them now, I look at them after reading her book and say, well, wait a minute, they look just like my nephews, and I know my nephews are wonderful. It's something that we have been taught in so many different unconscious ways because it benefits people at the top to keep their positions. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Tanya. Tia Marie?
Thank you so much, Jody. It's also very good to see you again, my dear. So
Oh, you're muted again.
Hold on.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I don't know what happened. Okay, sorry about that. First of all, I'm in Novi, everybody. My name is Tia Marie. And I was able to be on the DEI discussion on Saturday, and we were able to break out into sessions. I think some of you were maybe there as well. What I would like to just reiterate, I said it in the chat, but I realized that not everybody sees the chat. These discussions are great. I don't ever want them to stop. But if we don't understand the life-threatening urgency that Black people in particular, because this white supremacy, this racism is targeted, is specific, and it's deadly. It is costing us our lives, our livelihood, our financial wealth, our ability to leave a legacy for our children. It destroys every single aspect of Black life. So while you flip through the pages, while you sign up for another Zoom, it is not going to do us any good until you actually take action. So while I love that all those things are happening, I would like for you to I employ you to do them on your own time, and that while you have time to actually be a part of policy changing, while you have an opportunity to change the way your business does business and who they do business with, while you have a decision every time you open your wallet to where you're going to put your dollars, when you have an opportunity to speak at your school board or your city council and voice that you see this racism, that you understand that it exists, whether you understand why or how does not matter, because while we wait for you to get there, our lives are in peril. So I truly do appreciate all of the efforts to do that homework, and by all means continue to do it. But do not make us, brown people, Black people, wait for you to do it. Because as you turn from page 99 to 100, another Black man, another Black child, another Black woman is disenfranchised, murdered, beaten, raped. We cannot afford another second. And until we're ready to have that kind of discussion, until we're ready to talk about that publicly as a group, that's what we should be coming together to talk about. All of the trainings, and I mean no disrespect to the person who is training. I think that you should definitely go to whatever trainings that she is offering, because she hit the nail on the head about 1,000 times talking a moment ago. And I do truly appreciate that the club has put this together, because I do realize that if you don't put it together, there are some people who will never participate in this kind of education. But I would hope that when our communities come together as Oakland County and Wayne County, and that we understand that the urgency to actually take action today, tomorrow, the next day, and the next day, until Black lives stop spilling blood in the streets. I cannot personally, I think emotionally, take another Zoom where we talk about how we're going to figure out how we should start the discussion. We started the discussion 400 plus years ago. We started trying to figure out solutions to stop this oppressive knee on our necks 400 years ago. While all of the people who didn't open a book yet were trying to figure out how to get there. And I'm less concerned about whether or not you call us the right thing. I'm less concerned about whether or not there are Black people at your job. What I'm more concerned about is when this deadly oppression stops, because we can stop it, just like we stop other things. We can, but it takes an active action. And that may not be everybody. So those who can't take action, get out of the way. Because those of us who know that our sons and our daughters, I have 2 of my own, are in peril every single time they leave my home, cannot afford another second. We can't afford another Zoom call. We can't afford another training, another DIE committee getting together. We can't afford for them to figure out what are the proper definitions and titles to call people. People are dying, and we're dying because we're Black, period. So when we want to see that change, and those who are ready to have that conversation, because I don't think I can take one of these anymore, please hit me up, please call me, because over in Novi, we are taking action, and I will continue to take action until I don't have a living breath in my body, because that is the sacrifice that it requires in order to end and dismantle systemic racism, white supremacy, calling it what it is, calling it out when we see it, and not standing for it in any form or fashion, whether we understand it or not, whether we get there or not, whether we read the right books or not. We need to take action. When Black people tell you that they are dying, believe them. And I don't mean it in any angry way. It's just, this is a very emotional topic for me. And we don't have enough time, y'all. We do not have enough time. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jody, again, mad respect. I miss you, girl. And anybody that wants to start the action part of this tomorrow, hit me up.
Thank you so much, Tia Marie. Ann Lynn.
Hey, Jody, this is Ann.
Hi. How are you?
I'm AJ's mom. I don't know if you remember all that
Oh, of
last
course
summer.
I do. Yes.
But, we're still working out in Oxford, trying to get the word out and trying to just listen. The one thing, I was just going to say before the last woman who was amazing spoke was basically the same thing. As I'm a white mom, but I have 2 boys that are brown. The biggest thing that I can do, I feel, is to shut up and listen. to what I can do. Not go out and say, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go read this book. I'm going to go, shake a Black person's hand. I'm just going to go out, listen to what I can do. If the action is needed, do it. It's not always easy. And as a white woman in Oxford, I've had threatening emails, threatening calls, threatening messages. I've had booby traps in my front yard because I'm vocal about doing this, and it's worth it to me, and it's definitely worth it to my boys. So instead of reading, take action. And if you can't take action, support those who do. If you can support with bottles of water or food or microphones or whatever you can, that's all appreciated. That's all I needed to say. I just wanted to be really quick. So thank you.
Thanks. Dwayne?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Christine, thank you for that presentation. Jody and Alex, thank you for all that you're doing to bring this about. I just really wanted to go and reflect a little bit on the march that I marched last summer on Brianna's birthday, and it was in commemorative of what would have been her 26th birthday. And we marched down Orchard Lake in West Bloomfield. And I had to learn the procedure of the new march. You have to, I guess, if you have someone to march with you, you would drive 2 cars to the destination, park one, then drive back to the point where you start the march. And then when the march ends, you can get into that car and then drive back. And these are just different things that you learn when you're in action on how to march. Someone had mentioned earlier about a quadrant, and they were talking about the different quads that are located. In restorative practices, I'm a teacher, and I was marching with some of my former students there in West Bloomfield. When you are practicing restorative justice or restorative practices, there's 4 people involved. There's 4 role models that we play. So this is an active way for us to take a look at the vaccine that's going to take place. Now, I'm saying this as an analogy because as adults, we learn that way. The vaccine for the Black Lives Matter and all of the marching will take place once the verdict comes in. Just like the vaccine has taken place and it's in effect for now what was our pandemic and what we were living through, COVID-19. So in COVID-19, of course, George Floyd was murdered right before us. And then of course, our response was we all got involved, and Black Lives Matter became a worthy symbol and not just something that I was, thinking about wearing a t-shirt because I am a Black male. So with those 4 people in restorative practices, this is a way that we can react. This is a way that we can be proactive. There's a victim, there's a bully. So we all know those roles. But then there's a bystander, and then there's an upstander. The upstanders, of course, are the people who march. The bystanders are the people who are watching the trial. We have all this opinion, and we're saying this and we're saying that. Okay. And some may not even be watching the trial and just understanding, okay, well, when it happens and the verdict comes out, what's going to be the response? What's going to be our proactive stance? So in being an upstander, we learn how to support those victims. In being an upstander, we take a look at what's at stake here in terms of our whole country, in terms of the whole world. The whole world is watching this and it's about to unfold. And just like the vaccine rolled out after we had to go through what we had to go through, well, now the justice is rolling out a year later. We're here now. What role will you take? Are you a bully? Are you a victim? Will you be an upstander, stand up for someone, or would you be a bystander? You can actively do this. You can actively do this. I taught you how to march. So get your partners, get out there and do what we have to do. And that's it for me.
Thank you. I think maybe we'll take this last question because we're a little bit over, but again, I just want to reiterate, this is just the beginning of this conversation, and it is my hope that we'll have many, many, many more of these. Okay. So Sarah.
Hi, yes.
Hi.
I'm kind of new. I have a question. I try to stay very active, but I don't always know what and where is taking place. So are there current existing policies in Michigan that we're trying to move forward within our state and local legislation that could be focused towards eliminating racism? Like new programs in schools, increase education, knowledge, and awareness of different diversities of groups. Is there stuff existing, and and maybe this is just a thought for, I work as a project manager. So for me, you get your requirements, you figure out a plan, and then you execute it. So sometimes being so very busy, it's harder to know what is completely out there. What state person, what legislation person's trying to push it? Is there a way that we could, is there an existing map overall of maybe this topic area that we could use to focus towards? May not be in this meeting, obviously, but maybe for future. And then maybe, I know there's a lot of talk of people wanting to take action. So that might be one way to begin to drive and understand where we could take the focus. And just, it might not be huge, big steps at once, but at least we can start incrementing. And as I was hearing about the quadrants, moving and shifting people around with the right type of policy and get more and more buy-in. So that was kind of my question. If we had, is there something existing with an organization like that? And then what are some existing policies, and this could be future discussion, that exists that we can get behind and move forward? So thank you.
Well,
Yeah, probably can answer that question better, maybe. I think that's a great question, and I think right now I'm not familiar with any legislation currently, but it's not like with such a big population in your area, it's not like you can't work with your reps to sponsor a bill. And we also do see what's happening in Georgia, and we've got to be vigilant that does not happen here, because that is Jim Crow, period. So
yeah, I'm well aware of the Republicans being in both houses and having definitely not the view of open, equal voting.
Tia or Dwayne might have some ideas. You've got so many good resources right here, so it's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Give Tia a call, she says. But I would also say we do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee in the OCDP. And I would encourage anybody that is interested in maybe even like what you're talking about, Sarah. I think that committee can be whatever we want to make of it. Like, do we want to propose legislation and lobby for legislation? Certainly we can organize marches, or I think that there can be a wide range of things that can be done with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. This, like trainings such as this, I think are very important, but I think action is also very important. So I would like to see the combination of those two things happening in the DEI committee. So if you're not a part of it and you would like to be, you can always sign up and join it too.
Sure. Like I said, this is really my first anything. So
thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody for coming, actually. this turnout was amazing, and I think it only speaks to the urgency of this topic right now. And thank you so much, Christine King, for coming and talking to us. And like I said, you know, consider going on the DEI committee and making some suggestions of what we could be doing going forward. I would really like that to be an energized group, and I hope that this is just one of many conversations. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. You know how to get a hold of me if you want to touch base. We have a meeting tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Be there, be square. Anyone else?
I just want to thank you for having me, and I think I've got a start of lots of great conversations and action. So that's so cool. So everybody take care and be safe. And again, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Have a good night, everyone.